I just was like, this is not what I want and I can't do this anymore. And in those moments, I was just completely lost it, like screaming, crying. He, for the first time ever in 10 years, told me that if I wanted to leave, I should leave. I was trying to be so hurtful that our marriage wouldn't survive. Sabotage was the only way I knew how to end a relationship. If you've ever questioned whether or not to have another baby, if you've ever doubted your marriage after becoming parents, if you've ever wondered whether a relationship has to be perfect to be sacred, this episode is for you. Welcome back to the Radically Honest Mom podcast. My name is Hannah Rose. In this episode, I'm taking you behind the scenes of the journey before baby number 3. The parts that we don't usually talk about, the doubts, the fractures, the moments where love feels fragile and nothing feels certain. Then after that, in the next episode, I'm going to talk about my pregnancy, which happened last year in 2025, how each trimester unfolded, how I supported wellness physically, spiritually, and emotionally in preparation to meet the baby. In episode 3 of this series, my husband will join me and we're going to share the birth story together. I just want to say up front, some of what I share today is deeply personal, but I really believe that stories are powerful medicine, and sometimes the story that you're afraid to share is the one that someone else really needs to hear to feel less alone. I overshare because I care. This is the story of what it looks like when everything's on the table and you choose honesty anyway. What I've learned over the years is that every pregnancy has a focus. It's different for every woman. It's different every pregnancy. It could look like focusing on health and nutrition or finding a home and nesting. But for me, it was getting my marriage healthy leading up to the 3rd pregnancy. Now, I want to kind of do a timeline for you throughout the episode. And let's start by going way back to 2021. And I was there really desiring a second baby so much. I had a 4-year-old at the time, and I just knew I never wanted to be an only child family. I grew up with 5 siblings, so that experience was really important for me. And I just knew I wanted more than one kid. But I was not 100% about my marriage even then. And on a very deep level was kind of secretly telling myself, I don't know if this marriage can survive a second baby. While that mentality is valid, it's not healthy, and it definitely has some pieces of self-sabotage running through it, because I wasn't assuming success. I was assuming failure and wasn't really being honest about it with myself or with my husband. We ended up moving forward with getting pregnant, and in 2022, in the second half of my pregnancy, there were a couple really extreme emotional breakdowns after some disagreements, and it was like the veil was so thin, I couldn't put up with what was going on in our dynamic anymore. From either direction, from how he was treating me, from how I was responding, how I was treating him, how we were living our lives. I just was like, this is not what I want, and I can't do this anymore. And in those moments, I was just completely lost it, like screaming, crying. It really felt like a different kind of breakdown. It wasn't your normal pregnancy, hormonal, emotional roller coaster. This was different. So in those moments, I knew something big was going to have to shift, but I didn't know when and I didn't know how. Moving forward with that second baby, the part of me that started to question whether or not I wanted to continue in the marriage kind of got louder, I would say. Fast forward from June 2022, when we had our second baby, to the fall of 2023. There were a couple fights and things that happened where I just really didn't feel safe, and I pretty much just shut down. But I felt trapped in a few different ways, and I know that there's a lot of women that resonate with this, because when we have kids, you might stop working, or you might have not been able to work up to a point to be able to financially support yourself. So it can be easy to end up in that place when you're taking care of young children. So for that reason, I stayed and was not truthful about where I really was with feeling hopeless about the relationship. I was tired. It had been 10 years of ups and downs, fights, repairing, processing. I just couldn't do it anymore. A couple weeks after I decided that, I was driving to a doctor's appointment to get birth control, and I was listening to a podcast about narcissism. I'm sure telling myself all kinds of stories about how much my husband was a narcissist. I stopped to get gas, and I drove away from the gas station with my brand new iPhone on the top of my car. And I was definitely 100% sober in that moment, but something about that moment of chaos, something clicked. I started to want to take accountability for myself. It was the cosmic bitch slap I needed to wake up. I started to look back at our worst fights over the years and realize that they all involved alcohol, well, most of them, and that he wasn't the only one drinking. I was drinking too. That day, I started on my sobriety journey. I knew I wanted to uplevel my life, and that didn't leave room for drunken fights and hangovers. I wanted to be conscious. I wanted to be present, to be healthy. After that, in January of 2024, we moved back into my in-laws' house because the rental we were in was being sold, and we couldn't really afford anything else at the time. Lo and behold, without any encouragement from me, my husband started doing work on himself. He started a mentorship and started working on sobriety as well. It was almost like when I stopped focusing on him and put the focus on myself and how I could grow and take accountability for myself, he started to shift. This is when the ice slowly started to soften. What did it take for me to finally share that I had given up emotionally on the marriage? February 2024, I found out I was pregnant. I had tried the IUD, but it was painful, so I took it out. I knew immediately when I found out that I did not want to choose that baby. I really believed that baby was sent to soften my heart, to take the risk of being vulnerable with my husband. The week before I found out, I had a couple moments of longing for a deeper connection with him and wanting to be transparent. I told him that I didn't want to keep the baby, and he was in full support. He felt financially and life situation-wise it wouldn't be best, even though he was open to making it work. I knew there was more to share, but I waited until the time felt right. After I had the medical abortion, I told him there was a lot on my heart I wanted to share. I told him I'd been planning to leave and had given up on the marriage emotionally. He was calm. I was surprised. He stayed grounded. In the past, he would have been more upset. He, for the first time ever in 10 years, told me that if I wanted to leave, I should leave, but that he was committed to making our family work, and also told me a deep desire of his heart was that our marriage would be so strong that we would be open to having another baby, a girl. What did it mean to me to hear him say that I could leave if I wanted to? I mean, it just really felt freeing is the word I would use, because in the past I had felt like he really wanted me to stay in the relationship so badly, regardless of whether or not it was healthy or whether or not I was happy. And so to hear him say those words really opened up something in me and my spirit, and just it felt like a shift to me. But there was still more. A month later, my birthday was coming up. The night before, I decided I needed to bare my heart to him again. I told him I had been flirting with my old boss and had been attracted to him, even though he wasn't pursuing me. He was encouraging the friendship, which really wasn't appropriate. Again, I realized I needed to be radically honest, regardless of the fear of how my husband would respond or what would happen to our marriage. I needed to be open, to be real, have a healthy and honest energy between us. Again, he stayed calm. He was hurt, but he actually started to take accountability for the part he had played in creating this situation to begin with. What did his accountability shift inside of me? It was just really healing, I guess, is the word I would use, to hear him not just go straight to blame and defensiveness. He was being reflective, and I really appreciated that. From there, we really began to rebuild. We had meetings 2 to 3 times a month to talk about what was coming up for us. We used conscious dialoguing. I was learning to gracefully speak to the patterns and habits within the dynamic that were hurting me, that didn't work for me, that made me feel unsafe. Speaking to the vision of the family and relationship that we desired. We were both exercising and taking better care of our health. For our 5-year wedding anniversary, we took a trip together. We updated our vows. We did a ceremony releasing old ways of being, the old versions of ourselves that we needed to bury, to let go of as we moved into a new phase of our relationship. But old habits die hard. There was another moment of regression after a big trip and a couple of fights. I had a 3-month-long sickness that drained me. I went back into my escapism and self-sabotage. I was trying to be so hurtful that our marriage wouldn't survive. Sabotage was the only way I knew how to end a relationship. That's what I did with the relationship before I met my husband, and that's what I tried to do again. I still didn't trust him to be able to hold me in the way that I wanted. I kept buying into the idea that looking outside of myself was the solution, that offering my body to another man was going to solve something. Even though I was rejected, it didn't matter. The intention and betrayal was there. I sat in it alone. The turning point was in late summer. I went to a women's retreat in Joshua Tree. I confided in a couple of other women who were also in long-term relationships with kids. No one could make this kind of decision for me, but I chose back in again. What did hearing from other long-term mothers and partners help me see more clearly in that moment? I think just having other perspectives from women on the same journey, hearing how they dealt with being in unhealthy dynamics, how they navigated communication, taking space, coming back together, creating real boundaries. Ending a relationship after kids is different than before kids. Not that you should stay in a toxic relationship, but what can you do to focus on yourself? To not be obsessed with where the partner isn't showing up, but being more obsessed with self-reflection, with radical responsibility, with growing into the powerful, sexy, abundant woman who has clear and loving boundaries. A couple months later, I was watching a masterclass by a couple who inspired me with their level of energetic hygiene. I wanted that with my husband. I decided to tell him that I had tried to sabotage our relationship again, but afterwards had renewed my commitment. What I didn't know was on that day that I was being brave enough to be vulnerable with him, I was pregnant with my husband's baby. We just didn't know it yet. Another baby, clearing the way for radical honesty again. My husband was understandably hurt. He was angry. But again, he stayed calm. He was about to leave for a big trip and told me he would sit with this and we could process more when he got back. The next day, the day before he left, I found out I was pregnant. I told him I couldn't wait, and there we were, pregnant for the 4th time together with a 2-year-old and 7-year-old in tow. It felt like divine timing. It was all on the table. In that moment, I knew I wanted that baby. I was ready to go all in. I wanted to give the marriage and the family the chance to grow, a chance to blossom into something beyond what I could ever even imagine. Kings and queens are not born. They are forged in the fire. If you want to see how our family continues to expand, follow along.
Thank you for listening. You can support the show by leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on Instagram and YouTube. Learn more about my private women's circle and birth education mentorship, Rooted. It's linked in the show notes. See you next time.